Hello guys, it's Graeme from Frontenac Cycle here again with another video. Today we're going to be discussing what to look for when purchasing a used bike and even when selling a used bike, what you should do to prep the bike to get ready to sell. I'd like to give a shout out to Jen over at NV Hair Studios for giving me the fresh cut. It's a bit windy today, so I hope it looks good on camera. So yeah, let's get into it. So we're going to be kind of looking at two different types of used bike today. One would be the moderately higher end road bike, mountain bike, whatever it might be, and then the other is going to be a junker, clunker, get around bike, don't care too much about it bike. There's going to be a bit of a difference between the two just in terms of what to look for, so let's get into that. So we have a Norco Threshold here that's been ridden for about 3 years, mostly on gravel, some on an indoor trainer, and it's being sold to a friend. So when you're selling a bike, you want to make sure that the parts that are past their prime, you replace those. Of course, you don't want to spend a lot of money on the bike because you're trying to make a bit of profit on the sale. So the big things to look at would be tires, cabling, and drivetrain. So the drivetrain includes the chain rings, the chain, and the cassette. An important part of determining how worn something is to make sure it's clean first. So we recommend getting the drivetrain all cleaned up. That way you'll be able to see how much wear is on the chain, cassette, and chain rings. This particular bike did have switched from the 2x setup that's currently on it, and they were running a 1x, so the chain rings we know aren't as heavily worn, and actually chain rings wear last on the drivetrain. So what we did with this one is we did check the chain. It was a bit worn, so we replaced that, as well as the tread on the rear tire was also a bit worn out. So yeah, we'll get some closer up looks of that and go from there. So as you can see, this is the old tire and this is the new tire. The tread is clearly worn off here. Rear tires always wear more quickly than the front. More weight on the back. Some people like to do cool skids in the gravel, and so that's really going to be the tire that gets replaced more often. And so yeah, fresh rubber like that's going to give you better grip in loose stuff, and it's going to make the ride a little bit more enjoyable. In the shop here we have the Park Tool chain checker tool, which will help us determine how stretched out a chain is. And what you can see here is that at 0.75 it tells you to replace. Anything below that is still good and is still a new chain. So when we switch it over, you can see that it's just touching that 0.75 mark. That means that this chain is stretched and it's time for a replacement. If you don't have the tool, you can get a new chain and put it next to the old one, and you can kind of see how far the links have stretched out. The reason you want to replace a chain like that is that the shifting does become sloppy. There's more play in the chain, and so the shift isn't as crisp. All right, so we've checked out the drivetrain and the tires for wear. Now we're going to check out the frame and the brake pads. Essentially, if the bike is clean, you'll be able to see any deep gouges or cracks in the frame and fork. Yeah, obviously, a crack is a big no-no, and you need to get it. You need to address that before anything. And then the brake pads. If you take the bike out for a quick spin, make sure the brakes are stopping firmly. And if you do have squeaky brakes, you can check out our previous video on how to fix that. So that kind of wraps up buying or selling a mid-range bike, and we're going to move on to the junker clunker series next. All right, so we're moving on to the clunker series, the point A to point B type of a bike, and the important things for a bike like this are three things. One is it's got to be able to stop, so making sure that the brakes work is very important. Making sure that the chain isn't jumping under pressure, also very important, as is checking to make sure that the bearings on the bike are not seized up or falling apart. Those three things can be quite expensive to fix and maybe might make the bike not worth it. So let's take a closer look at that. All right, so in addition to the first three things we talked about, checking the tires is still going to be important on a junker, making sure that there's no major cracks in the sidewall or through the top part of the tread. That's not as an expensive fix. You can usually get a tire for around $25, and so that's not as costly. Moving on to the brakes. You want to make sure that the brakes are moving freely. Sometimes the spring tension needs to be centered, so that's not a big deal. Making sure that the brake pads aren't completely worn down to the metal, and making sure that the rim doesn't have cracks or is extremely worn, like a concave rim. The drivetrain, when we talk about jumping under pressure, what that is an indication of is the chain being far too stretched, the teeth on the cassette or the teeth on the chainring being shark-toothed, so really worn, so that they're no longer straight and they've bent, and so the chain just slides over. That's an expensive fix, so you want to avoid that. And as for the bearings, there's a pretty quick, easy check to check and see if a bearing is still functioning. For the bottom bracket, you just want to grab the cranks and move them side to side. If there's no, this one doesn't have any play, so that's great. If there's a little bit of play, usually that can be tightened up. Same thing with the wheels. You want to make sure you want to move them back and forth. Again, there's no play in that wheel. Again, that can usually be tightened up easily. Same thing with the back. And then the headset on the bike, if you hold onto the front brake, put your finger around the headset and wiggle it back and forth. If there's play there, again, you can usually tighten those things up. If they don't tighten up, it's an indication that the bearings are shot, and it's maybe something you should avoid buying. All right, so if you're looking to buy or sell a used bike, whether it's high-end or low-end, it's always important to take the bike for a test ride, make sure the bike fits, shift through the gears, brakes are stopping you, and if you do have concerns about a part on the bike, you can always bring it by the shop. We'll give you advice on what we think needs to be fixed or replaced, and we can go over the cost to do so. If you guys found this video helpful, please like and subscribe down below. Thanks. Check to make sure that everything's working to your satisfaction. I can't remember what else we were going to do. Hold on, let me redo that. Wouldn't be a video if I didn't have an outtake.